We're cracking open a fascinating old book today.
Oh, yeah.
It's called The Old Charges of Free and Accepted Masons, published in 1723.
I've heard of it. It's kind of a big deal, right? For Freemasons, at least.
It's basically their foundation, yeah. But what's really cool is how much of it still applies today. Like 300-year-old life advice.
It's like a time capsule of values, not just about Masonry itself, but how people thought about work, behavior, community.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack some of that for anyone who's ever wondered what these Masonic principles are all about.
Should be fun.
Okay, first section. God and religion.
Getting right to the heart of it.
Well, back then, Masons had to belong to the main religion of their country.
Right, that was the standard then.
But then James Anderson, who wrote this, kind of added a twist.
What did he do?
He emphasized being good men and true, no matter what you specifically believed.
Interesting. So, good character over strict dogma.
Pretty much. And this was huge. Think about it. 1723, Europe's just had tons of religious wars.
Oh, absolutely. This idea of unity despite your faith. Super radical for the time.
Masonry even saw itself as a center of union, bridging those divides.
Which, looking around today, maybe that's an idea we still need. Finding that common ground.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
All right, next. Of the civil magistrate sounds intense.
Well, basically, be a good citizen. No plots, no rebellions. Masons were all about loyalty to the state.
Makes sense. They thrived in times of peace, right? Stability helped them grow.
Exactly. Plus, rulers liked having these orderly, reliable folks around.
So toe the line, don't cause trouble. But wait, there's this thing about a rebellious brother.
Ah, yes. See, even if a Mason went against the government, the lodge wouldn't kick him out. Indefeasible ties, they called it. Bond remained even when they disagreed.
That's some serious commitment. Makes you wonder if we've lost that a bit today, that ability to disagree but stay connected.
Food for thought, isn't it? What holds a community together when times get tough?
Okay, let's get into what a lodge actually was. More than just secret handshakes, I assume.
Oh, way more. Think meeting hall, workshop, social club, all in one. A place to gather, work on your craft, build those bonds.
And becoming a member wasn't just like signing up for a gym, right?
Not at all. It was a serious commitment with some pretty strict rules about who could join.
Yeah, the good and true men, freeborn, and notably no bondmen or women.
It's important to remember the context, of course. Those limitations reflect the times, which were not inclusive by today's standards.
Makes you think about how far we've come and maybe how far we still have to go.
Exactly. Examining how those rules have changed, or haven't, tells us a lot about how Masonry fits into the modern world.
Right. Next up, it's hierarchy and advancement. Sounds like they had a clear path to climb within the lodge.
They did, and what's fascinating is it wasn't about seniority. All preferment, grounded upon real worth and personal merit only.
So basically, prove your skill, show your dedication, and you could rise through the ranks.
Exactly. From apprentice to fellow craft, warden, master, all the way up to grandmaster.
A system based on what you could do, not who you knew. Kind of refreshing, honestly.
It raises questions about leadership today, doesn't it? Do we still value merit that highly?
Or do connections and who you are still hold too much weight? I think we've all seen that happen.
True, true. It's an ideal to strive for, but the reality is always more complex.
Okay, let's move on to the work itself. Section V, work ethic. I'm curious what their standards were.
Well, honesty and fairness were huge. Cutting corners, absolutely not allowed. And this is where it gets interesting. They emphasized not disrupting what was already working well.
Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. They understood that messing with a system unnecessarily could be detrimental. It's a concept that resonates with modern project management ideas.
Respect the process, respect the expertise, very forward-thinking for their time.
They weren't about reinventing the wheel. They understood the value of tried and true methods.
Makes sense. Okay, last one for this part. We've got Section 6, Code of Conduct. This seems packed with details.
Oh, it is. This is where we see how they were expected to act, both inside and outside the lodge.
All right, hit me with some highlights. What were the big no-nos, and what did they really emphasize?
Well, right off the bat, gossip and slander were forbidden. Protecting a brother's reputation was paramount.
Loyalty, discretion, what happens in the lodge stays in the lodge kind of thing.
Exactly. But it goes deeper than that. They emphasized resolving disputes within the lodge through mediation rather than going to court.
Interesting. So internal conflict resolution, keeping things amicable, preventing escalation.
Right. And remember that line about how even a penetrating stranger wouldn't be able to figure out their secrets?
Ah, yes. Secrecy was a big deal for them. But why so much emphasis on it, I wonder?
It's probably a mix of protecting their traditions and knowledge ND and maintaining that sense of brotherhood, a bit of you have to be one of us to know what's going on.
Makes you think about how we handle transparency today. In the age of oversharing online, it's a tricky balance.
It certainly is. Where do we draw the line between openness and protecting what's sacred or private?
Lots to ponder there. Well, we've covered a lot in this first part. Religion, loyalty, work ethic, this fascinating code of conduct.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to these charges. Their views on charity, morality, personal growth.
All that coming up in part 2. Stay tuned, folks. We're just getting started. Welcome back. I'm really curious to see how all those guidelines played out in their actual work. I mean, these were builders, right? Not just philosophers.
Absolutely. And that's where Section V gets fascinating, of the management of the craft in working. Remember how honesty and fairness were so important? Well, that extended to how they used their clients' resources, treated them like their own.
So no cutting corners to save a buck. No swapping in cheaper materials.
No way. Pride in their work, doing things the right way. That was key. And the charges even say the most skilled craftsman, the master, should be in charge, not just whoever's been around longest, but who genuinely knows best.
A system that rewarded actual ability. Was that common back then, I wonder? Because that was pretty modern.
Shows their focus on competence for sure, getting the job done right. And it wasn't just the master with responsibilities. The fellow craftsmen, the skilled workers, they had to follow his lead, work together smoothly.
No drama on the job site. Hard to imagine.
Well, every workplace has its moments, right? But the charges specifically say no ill language, address each other as brother or fellow. Respect and courtesy were vital, both in the lodge and on the job.
Like they knew a positive environment got the best results. Anything else about their work process stand out to you?
One thing's really interesting, we touched on it before. They emphasized not disrupting what was already working well. That phrase, putting the work to tasks that have been accustomed to journey.
Yeah, a bit cryptic.
It's about respecting established workflows. Don't mess with what's effective. Kind of like best practices today, or standardized procedures.
Wow, almost like they anticipated needing operations manuals, quality control, all that stuff, centuries ahead of their time.
Yeah.
Okay, so work ethic, project organization. But I'm dying to hear more about this code of conduct outside of work.
Section 6 is where it gets juicy. How they were supposed to act, not just in the lodge, but out in the world.
Give you the highlights. Big no-nos, key values, all that.
First off, gossip and slander. Totally forbidden. Protecting a brother's reputation was huge E. Loyalty and discretion were highly valued.
So that what happens in the lodge stays in the lodge idea again?
Exactly. But it's more than that. They were big on settling disputes internally through mediation, not lawsuits.
Like a built-in system to keep the peace, prevent things from getting out of hand. Makes you wonder if we could use a bit of that today.
It does, doesn't it? All this public airing of grievances, maybe some things are better handled privately.
And remember that line about how even a total outsider couldn't figure out their secrets?
Secrecy was a big deal. Part of it was protecting their traditions, their knowledge, but also maintaining that brotherhood. Like, you're not one of us. You don't get to know.
It's fascinating. In today's world of oversharing online, that idea of keeping things private, it's a tough balance to strike.
It is. When does transparency become harmful? When is privacy crucial? Lots to think about.
All right, so loyalty, conflict resolution, discretion. What else stood out in this code?
One thing that really highlights how they were supposed to live these values, not just talk about them. The charges say to act as becomes a moral and wise man, not just in the lodge, but at home, in the community.
So it wasn't just about following rules. It was about being a genuinely good person all the time.
Exactly. And they even advised against revealing lodge business to family and friends. Some things were for brothers only.
I get the discretion part, especially back then. But what did moral and wise actually look like in daily life?
Well, things like avoiding excessive drinking, fulfilling family obligations, generally behaving honorably, stuff that would earn respect in your community.
So being a good Mason meant being a good citizen too. It's all connected, like a blueprint for ethical living, not just specific rules to follow.
Exactly. And that idea that your actions reflect on the whole brotherhood is powerful. Accountability, understanding, we're all interconnected.
It makes you think about how WE represent the groups we belong to. Striving to be good people, It has a ripple effect. Okay, so we've covered their work ethic, their commitment to ethical behavior.
And there's more. But I want to highlight one last thing from the code that feels really relevant today.
Lay it on me.
It's that focus on respect and courtesy, which we talked about before. Remember, no ill language, always addressing each other as brother or fellow.
Right, treating each other well.
But it went beyond that. That same courtesy was supposed to extend to everyone they interacted with.
So not just being nice to fellow Masons, but being a decent human being to all people.
Exactly. The charges emphasize behaving as becomes a moral and wise man in all social situations. Like being part of this brotherhood meant spreading that kindness and respect outwards.
That's powerful, especially today when online interactions can be so nasty. Imagine if we all acted like that, treating everyone, online or offline, with that same courtesy.
It's a thought-provoking idea, isn't it? Applying those centuries-old principles to our modern world.
I think it's something we could all benefit from, taking a moment to consider how we treat others, bringing a little bit of that Masonic courtesy into our daily lives.
A challenge worth striving for sure.
I've learned so much about how these early Masons lived, worked, thought.
Really fascinating, right? Like digging up not just history, but ideas that still matter.
Exactly. So for this last part, I want to focus on what I think are the most relevant takeaways, the stuff that feels like it could have been written yesterday.
Oh, I agree. There's so much wisdom packed in there. Like they boiled down centuries of human experience into these guidelines for a good life, a good community.
So let's start with something we talked about before, meritocracy. The charges are clear. All preferment is grounded upon real worth and personal merit only. Not who you know, not your family, but what you can actually do.
Powerful concept, still today, especially in our world where everyone's striving for success. But it does raise questions like, what is all merit, really? How do we define that fairly?
Right, because on paper, meritocracy sounds great, but real life is messy. Privilege, bias, all those things that stack the deck for some people.
Absolutely. If we're going to value merit, we got to make sure the system is fair, that everyone has a chance to show what they're capable of.
It's like the Masons were onto something, but even their system wasn't perfect.
Right.
Okay, another thing that stood out to me, their approach to conflict. Settling disputes internally, avoiding lawsuits. It's almost like they were mediators before that was a thing.
Right. Emphasizing harmony, preserving relationships. Disagreements happen, but it's how you handle them that matters.
Makes you think, how do WE handle conflict? Do we jump to conclusions, take sides, escalate things? Or do we try to understand, listen, find common ground?
It's a challenge, but the rewards are huge. If we can apply that in our own lives, our communities, even in how we think about bigger societal issues.
And speaking of bigger issues, I was struck by the emphasis on honesty, integrity. Be truthful in your dealings, fair in your work, don't cheat people.
It's about having a moral compass, not just following rules, doing the right thing even when nobody's looking.
Building your reputation on trust, right? That applies to individuals, to businesses, even to whole countries, honestly.
Absolutely. It's about accountability. Recognizing that our actions have consequences and that building a better world starts with each of us, making those ethical choices even when it's tough.
Okay, one last thing I gotta highlight. Remember that line about keeping secrets, even from a penetrating stranger? Discretion, confidentiality. It seems those mattered a lot.
And it makes you think, in our world of social media, where everything's out there, how do we balance transparency with protecting what should be private?
Tough question, no easy answers. But I think the takeaway is be mindful. What we share, how we share it. A little discretion goes a long way.
Well said. I think we've come full circle here. Merit, integrity, conflict resolution, discretion. These old Masons had principles that still resonate today.
It's amazing, isn't it? A 300-year-old book, and we're still having these conversations.
Shows that human nature, the stuff we struggle with, it doesn't change that much, even if the world around us is totally different.
So as we wrap up, I encourage everyone listening, think about what stood out to you from these old charges, what resonated, what made you think, and how can you apply those ideas to your life, your work, the communities you're part of?
Because that's the real value here. It's not just about history, it's about taking those lessons and using them to live better, build a better future. One that reflects those timeless values, integrity, fairness, respect, all that good stuff.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of 18th century Freemasonry. We hope you learned something, and maybe even got inspired to keep exploring these ideas on your own.